All right, welcome everybody. We're going to give people a couple minutes to sign in, but Alicia and Alex, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you both. How are you both today as we wait for people to sign on? Give me like a word or a phrase, like what are the vibes in New Haven and in St. Louis?
That's a tough question, Ellen, to start
That
off.
wasn't on our list of
Yeah,
prep questions. My
I
my vibe is rainy. I'm in Washington, D.C., and it's raining, and that feels good for like the mood here in D.C.
it's pretty gray here in Connecticut right now. In New Haven, it's gray. I would say it's nice to be with people that I appreciate and are like-minded at the moment.
It is.
It's pretty cloudy here, but the children just got back from the art museum, so I'm excited to hear all the chatter in the piazza.
Mm,
So,
amazing.
be
Um,
able
so
to learn what they took in.
yeah, I'm gonna tag a question for you later about what's a piazza, but hopefully people have signed in. So this is our LinkedIn Live, taking you behind the scenes of two ideal learning environments. My name is Ellen Roche. I'm gonna channel Miss Frizzle of the Magic School Bus Days today because the point is really to take us all virtually to visit two extraordinary programs and hear from both of you truly exemplary early childhood leaders and go behind the scenes of your centers. So this conversation was sparked by the release of a couple of videos over the past few months that feature footage from both Urban Sprouts in St. Louis and from Friends Center in New Haven. So Alicia and Alex are the respective founders and leaders of those centers. And I want to pick your brains on like, how have you created these extraordinary learning environments for children? What can we learn from you? What have I experienced working with you? And how do we like unpack that magic for other people? So thank you guys for being here. Alicia, I'm going to start with you and have you introduce, who are you? Why did you found Urban Sprouts? What is Urban Sprouts? Who do you serve? And how do you think of Urban Sprouts as an ideal learning environment for your community?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting us, Ellen, and it's good to be here with you, Alex. I started Urban Sprouts in 2009 for my daughter. I wanted something where my child could play in her own neighborhood, have folks that looked like her, and receive a quality early care and education. And we started with a really small school, and we've now grown pretty large over the last 15 years. But it's all been centered around community and what are the needs of the community. And we're still centering community today. We use the Reggio approach as a basis for our learning as a guide. And one of the principles is listening and really being attuned to what folks are saying. And so we continue to evolve and shape the school to reflect the needs of the people that we serve, who are our neighbors, and the people that you meet each day, right? Is that what our friend used to tell us, Mr. Robert Rogers? Um, and so we are still doing what we did in 2029, which is taking our time and making sure that children have a joyous, not 2029, 2009, is taking our time and making sure that each child has a joyous early childhood.
Mhm. So for people who signed in a minute late, you might have missed that the children at Urban Sprouts just got back from where, Alicia?
The art museum. So we just culminated our Black History Month um, celebrations with the Art Basel last week. And one of the artists that has been visiting with us over the last couple weeks was a potter. And that potter's works is in the art museum. And so our children went to go visit him in his place today.
Mm.
So our children are out in the piazza, which is our town square, a place where we gather, having lunch and discussing um, their trip. So it's really exciting.
So when I hear, a field trip to an art museum, gathering in the piazza for lunch and discussion with an artist, I'm thinking, okay, that's like a high schooler activity or a college student activity. But just remind us, Alicia, how old are the children in your program?
So our children are birth to age 5, and the children that went to the art museum are 3 to 5.
Amazing. Okay, and tell us, what's the piazza? You said you were excited to talk to the children when they got back at the piazza. What is that?
So our piazza basically is our gathering place, and in Italy, there are all these piazzas and squares where folks gather and they shop, and there's markets, and there's just a place of being with each other. And so we've designed that in our school to be reflective of how can we of the our colleagues in Reggio Emilia, Italy, and it's really become a very strong gathering place. And so we have all of our family events, and our children dine there for breakfast, lunch, and a snack, and they're able to come together with other classrooms and their peers, and eat and chat. And so it's a very beautiful space. It's not really a cafeteria because it's open, so people are passing by all the time. You've got people coming and going, teachers and therapists and children, and it's very beautiful and town like.
Amazing. Okay, Alex, I'm going to transition over to you. We're getting in our little cartoon school bus, like popping down a manhole cover, traveling up to New Haven, Connecticut, and kind of building off of what Ellicia was just sharing. So I have been able to visit your program a couple of times. And one of the things that I experience about what we call ideal learning environments for young children is that they feel different when you walk in. And that has so many sort of things to unpack behind it. But it's certainly how I felt walking into your program. And Ellicia, I can't wait to visit someday in St. Louis, but it's how I felt watching the footage of your program. So Alex, what is Friend Center? Why did you found it? And how do you think about it as an ideal learning environment?
Well, I love that we start with this frame of like, how do you feel? Because actually the Friend Center was conceptually founded in 2001 by New Haven Quakers. And I was pregnant with my first child, who's now 23 at the same time. So it was 23 years ago, just to give context. And we started in the basement of a church, like I always say, most preschools or early care and education programs start. But the why I wanted to do this work is really personal to me. I wanted to create safe and joyful spaces for children that really give them a voice. And as a young person, I was often unsafe. My parents were really thwarted by addiction and mental health issues, like a lot of us, I'm sure. And as a result, I didn't have really boundaries that were safe. And so at 15, after a really traumatic event for me, I made the decision to grow up and create safe, loving, joyful spaces for children. And that desire grew stronger each year. So through high school, through college, through my graduate school, and I just kept dreaming of this place. And I came back to New Haven after school, and the Quakers were interested in the same thing. And they had talked to our community, and the community said, we really need early care and education programs in our where we live. And so we came together along with countless other members of the community, and it's really manifested into what you've just described, this like space and place that is rooted in children, rooted in the essence of children, in their families, in equity, in community, in understanding how children evolve and what type of environment allows them to be their best selves. And so that is really what you're describing when you talk about that feeling. And we hear that a lot when you walk in. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to look at. It's beautiful to feel. Your senses are not overwhelmed. You're sort of welcomed into the space with respect and allowed to explore our community and our environment in the way that works for you. And that translates to all visitors, to staff members, to students. And we serve children 3 months to 5 years. We have a sliding scale tuition. We have no racial or ethnic majority in our program. And that is really an intentional reflection of the community we live in. So New Haven is about a third African-American, a third Caucasian, and a third Latinx. And so we really are trying to mirror that in our program. So that tells you a little bit about us.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. And I'm thinking about people who are tuning in. So the three of us share this common framework and this common language around ideal learning environments, which are very simply 9 core principles that can guide a learning environment in any publicly funded setting. They're aligned with developmental science. They align with what we want for our country in terms of our values of racial equity and inclusion. It's about play-based learning, learning in the context of relationships. So we can go more into detail on those principles and how they show up. But I saw you nodding along, Ellicia, a few times listening to Allyx talk. And I'm just curious, like, what resonated for you? I saw you nodding around like children's voice, right? We don't think about kids who are babies, right?
Pre-verbal, right?
Yeah. So what does that mean, right? For an infant to have voice in their learning environment? For either of you, but yeah.
So I am
Oh, I think so. Ellicia is in her program.
Yes, so I am always like intrigued when I hear things that kind of mirror the thought process that we have of trying to create an equitable um, learning environment. Doesn't just mean that we are centering like play and learning, but that we're also thinking about what is the social economic impacts of the work that we're doing with families, right? And like we have families that come from 39 different zip codes right now. And like I think we're at maybe like 78% of our families are they pay little to nothing to come here, and to think about that happening in New Haven as well is very beautiful, because this work is not easy and it requires intentionality, and connecting with people who really understand how we need to show up for families is why I was nodding. So thank you for the work that you're doing, Allyx.
Yeah.
And as it relates to infants, we take children from the hospital at birth. So there have been times where children are, their family may be in some sort of a crisis, and the child must be removed from the mother, which is already, pretty traumatic for a newborn. And so we work with foster organizations to ensure that we keep 8% of our slots pretty flexible so that those families can come in, those foster families can come in and get reliable care, and those foster families can return to work. And so when you think about listening to the voice of an infant, that voice can come with a lot of cries sometimes, and it can come with coos, right? But that we have caregivers who understand that this is neuroscience and caregiving, and that mixture helps us to think about this developing human as a person who's deserving of what they need. And responsive caregiving is essential in the cornerstone of our care, which is our infant care, because the way in which we respond to children who are nonverbal, and the environment that we provide them to feel safe, to feel loved, and to feel honored is important, and it sets the stage for their life.
I love the framing around responsive caregiving, Ellicia. I think it's just so incredibly important. And it relates really well, Ellen, to what you were talking about in terms of the principles. So just using an example for our pre-verbal friends, you're following their cues, which is what Ellicia was talking about. But in order to do that for someone who is new to the world, you have to be flexible in your schedule, for example. Yeah. So that's just one way that one of the principles, which is really about honoring the time of children, shows up in that way. So those are some just very, very tiny thing that can change the whole day and life of a young friend, someone who's coming in at 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months. So that's just one example.
And how you do that in a classroom that also has all of these from the state, from the accrediting bodies, from Head Start is difficult, and why it's important to honor the people who are in the classrooms and what they must possess to be that person, right? So choosing someone who has the right temperament to be able to understand that the cry is not something that should be you can't put someone in there who can't stand crying, right? Because the cries are the cues, right? And that babies often have to take a number, right? And so what does that wait time look? Is there a healthy balance
Oh,
of,
yes.
can that baby wait? Are we teaching this baby that, are we reactionary, or are we able to talk to the child across the room? I can't get to you right now, but I'm on my way. So are we building reassurance? Are we affirming? And it's not about like, holding the child all the time, which I believe you cannot spoil baby. There's no such thing.
Mm.
Um,
What
because
All right, go ahead.
yeah, and so what that looks like in the world of all the funding streams, all the curriculums, really is in the behaviors and how we show up, and how do we as leaders of programs think about how are we giving the teachers time to show up for the children and time separately to do the task. Because when they have to balance all of that, it really, to me, offsets the classroom and doesn't allow for this sort of wonderful world that children deserve.
Two immediate thoughts on that. I mean, we could go forever. I feel like there's so much. So two immediate thoughts. One is it's really interesting to think about, to pull back a little bit and think about what Alicia's talking about in terms of the ways that we're helping even these very young babies and humans learn about waiting, or like what, and if you reference that in relation to like tolerable stress versus toxic stress, these are life skills then that have not only are they critical for the individual, but also they're critical for the adult to understand the difference, because one can change they both change architecture of the brain, but one can change in a negative way. And so many of the children that we work with and the families that we work with and the staff that we work with have had these really negative toxic trauma experiences. And if you don't create an environment where that is part of the culture and the norm to talk about and to work through, you're not going to get to that optimal self, either for the educator or for the child or for the family. And I am a firm believer. I mean, I think I'm assuming most of on this call know this and believe it, but children do best when the adults around them are thriving and happy and healthy and their basic needs are met and they're in partnership. So that's the way we approach our work. We are in partnership with our parents. What do they need to thrive so their child can thrive? So it's a lot. Think about what these teachers need to be able to do, back to Alicia's point. So we have to make sure they are well supported, and they're not in our society right now. They may be in individual programs, but as a sector and as a whole, we pay them poverty level wages for arguably the hardest work.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask a follow-up question that, digs into two pieces of that, which I'm sure many people listening are really interested in, because I think what my experience has been, nobody says like, oh no, we don't want ideal learning environments. We all want this for children, right? We all want to walk into a center and feel the way both of your centers feel and see children thriving in the way that kids are thriving, working with their educators in your learning environments. But then it's like, how do we do this, right? How do we build so many things behind the scenes that scaffold those experiences in centers? So I want to tease apart two of them right now to give people a little bit of insight into your programs. Talk about the funding that you all are using, various ways that you're bringing in funds, blending them, et cetera. So give us some visibility into that. And then also talk about that support of adults in the environment piece, right? Like, what are some of those strategies and tactics that you are implementing that I don't think are standard based on what I know of both of your programs? And to the extent you can, like, how are you finding the funding for that? Because the three of us know, everybody who's listening knows that the sector is so deeply underfunded, right? So how are you all doing what seems kind of like impossible math to fund these beautiful centers and support adults to have the presence and capacity to show up in this way? Or at least give us a glimpse, because I know there's more than we're going to be able to cover today.
Happy to. So we have three what I would call income buckets. I think funding is one piece of it, but I think ethos and belief system is another. And I think it's I would be cautious that we say it's only about funding. I just want to put that out there. I'm not, funding matters, but so we have three buckets of money that we have. We have earned income, which is, our tuition. We have donations, and then we have federal funding. 34% is earned income, 7% is donations, and then 59% is state and federal funding. And it's through Early Head Start, Care for Kids. And in Connecticut, we have school readiness and child daycare grant funds. Our federal funding, just to like name sort of this elephant, we've always been underfunded as a sector, literally because it's rests upon a system that is sexist and racist. So we have had that it's grown out of our system. So we've always had this, but now we have sort of this federal funding situation that's happening as well. We are not a direct recipient of federal funding. Our early head starts are a pass-through. So we're a little bit more secure in terms of direct federal funding, but our major vulnerability, and I think this is true for all of us, whether or not you have funding on the call, is we have parents who are losing their income because they've lost because of funding freezes, and our state could lose billions of dollars, which then in turn would cause us to lose some money because the state would need to backfill in other places. So we're really thinking about that a lot and coming up with some plans on how to mitigate that if that happens. So that's sort of where our funding comes from. And in terms of your question about, how do we do this piece, it really goes back to, in my opinion, with the principles or any mission or values sort of place, we don't apply them, we live them. And when you live something, it's not hard. It's who you are. It's how you show up, right? So what I find the best way to manage sort of these external expectations, as I call them, like, you have to do this and and we have, as I said, we have 5 different funding sources. So each one has their own, we do our thing and make those, demands, I'm going to say, to make those demands fit into what we're already doing. And because we're sort of unwavering in our commitment to really ensuring that the children, the families, and the teachers get the best care / environment that they can. So that's a workaround a little bit. Like, we'll take a standard and be like, oh, we're doing that. Here's how we make it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking this morning about how, so I think sometimes early childhood and the principles of ideal learning and how we talk about it, it can come off very warm and fuzzy because there is this deep nurturing right at the heart of these principles. But I also know both of you to be completely unwavering. And the combination, right, of like taking a completely firm stand on your vision. And this idea of nurturing, I don't know that we always talk about those things in the same breath, but I think we should, right? To talk about to build on your point about who these broken systems were built upon, right? Like, how do we embody that? And Ellicia, I know that of you. And I really appreciate this idea that like it's ethos first, and then we problem solve from there around what are the demands, expectations, things we need to figure out. And I think that's such an important takeaway for people listening. Ellicia, can you kind of put that in your words or respond to it? Or how do you think about holding this really extraordinary, beautiful vision? Again, for folks tuning in who don't know these 2 programs, watch these videos when you have a chance to get inside of both of these centers. But yeah, Ellicia, how do you think about it, holding that vision amidst all of the demands?
So I would agree with Allyx in that, budget and costs are at the top of our priorities because we have to take care of people, right? But I think, again, ethos is exactly what is keeping us centered. And we start our meetings and we start our professional development sessions with how are the children, right? And so centering the children and their families and the community in our decision making and what funding streams we do access, how we utilize them is really important. We are not a federal Head Start grantee either. We are a sub grantee. We have an amazing partnership with the organization called Youth in Need. They've been nothing but wonderful to us and actually have carried us through these turbulent times that it's been uncertain since 2020, if we all don't know. And so I think being, in partnership with an organization who has like values has been um, essential into how we do this work. We started off again, I said, with 30 children. In 2009, we built a school for 30. We started with one child. And it was two of us, right, on our leadership team. And now there's 10 of us on our leadership team. And so, being that two people carried this school for almost 10 years, it really has been about the people, and like the budget is the people. So 85% of our budget goes to educators and administrators to keep the program going. And our sustainability model is just how do we show up together, right? That the priority is the people at all times. And I love so much that you said that it's how you live, but for us in the Reggio approach, we call it the life, right? That we don't want you to come here and just be an educator, or we don't want you to just come here and drop your child off, but that we are doing life together. So are we asking people to check their baggage at the door? No, right? There's no such thing. And so we've been able to purchase. We've been able to watch 10 educators purchase homes in the last 3 years. I know some beautiful work is going on in New Haven that we're interested in and want to use as a model, but how do we create this livelihood that helps to contribute to the sustainability, and how the funding flows through to the people is really important. Missouri has a long way to go in childcare subsidy and reimbursement rates. And we have a childcare shortage here in St. Louis and across the state. There are many childcare deserts. We are licensed for 142, and we just expanded with an additional 56 slots, but we have a waiting list of over 650 children. And so that is not like, oh wow, Urban Sprouts is doing a wonderful thing. When I hear that, it keeps me up at night, because where are those 650 children, and what is keeping them from accessing quality care? And funding has a lot to do with it, but it's also the access to information to be able to resource other centers around us, to be able to educate the directors and the teachers in the way that allows them to be able to have a program that's this rich. So it's a privilege to be where we are, for sure, because we know the systems are not just impacted by the funds that flow through them, but also the educational, health, and other inequities that lie within the communities that impact the people who are working in this space.
Mm-hmm. So we have about 15 minutes left. Obviously, I've gone slightly off script to kind of follow you all's lead. I want to address a question that came up from somebody who's listening in that kind of builds on what you were both just saying. So the way the person phrased it was, how do you build a community around you that has this same ethos and same vision for early childhood? And I will just kind of rephrase this from my own perspective, because I have had a fear, I still nurture this fear sometimes, that so many of these really extraordinary ideal learning environments that I've been in, that I know the leaders of, that they might rest on the vision and the work of a single leader, right? Which makes them fragile and vulnerable, and also puts such stress and pressure on the individual leader. And what the experience I've had meeting both of your colleagues and Allyx visiting your school is that, if I chat with Miriam or chat with LaDonna, right, your colleagues, they just hold the ethos too, right? Like it's a shared ethos, it's a shared mission, and it becomes so much part of the culture that it's unstated. But take us behind the scenes there, right? As the founders, as the leaders, how do you support that like leadership ethos and even, you know, classroom educator ethos, parent ethos. Ellicia, I will never forget when you were FaceTiming with somebody. We were at our board meeting last year, and Alicia's like, "Oh, meet my friend, you know, Ellen." We were sitting next to each other at dinner. She FaceTimes me with the woman on the other end of the line. And the woman on the other end of the line gave me this extraordinary tour of one of their rooms. And I thought, oh, that must be the, you know, VP of outreach or something. And Allicia says, oh, that's one of our parents, right? That the parent was showing up so versant, right, in the ethos and all the things. So yeah, how? Take us behind the scenes of that, like shared ethos. How do you develop it? Or how have you developed it over time?
Well, I mean, you can kind of see this is not a filter behind me. And we intentionally, I pointed the school, the front of the school points towards an alley. You know, alleys are a part of neighborhoods and they're not celebrated, right? But they're a way that people go in and out of them and children play in them. And so we wanted to make sure that the school really did carry from the time you pull up to the time you drop your child off, carry the essence of community. And so when you come in, we have families, hopes and dreams for themselves hanging above their heads so that they can ground themselves in that when they come in. We're a cell phone free environment because we want you to be attuned to what is happening with your child. We ask families to come early and take your time walking and try not to rush. Now that is not there are rush, right? And you know, but how do we help everyone around us to slow down and be intentional and to be a part of community? And everybody doesn't know how to show up like that. So in the beginning of the year, we used to do these silly like curriculum nights because everybody does them, right? And I shouldn't call them silly because they're probably just fine. And you know, we would talk about the curriculum in the classrooms, and the teachers would kind of show off activities that the children would be doing. But what I found was that the parents really weren't grasping like all that they could from the program. So we started a parent university in the beginning of the year that really talked about the approach and how we want to show up for the parents, and we help them set goals and to also pick like folks in the crowd and make new relationships. And so we're spending more time on what does together mean. And I think again, creating that culture, that ethos of togetherness is important. People need to be held like never before, and not always in a bad way, right? That you know that there's going to be someone that receives your child with a smile, that things are going to be predictable because there's so much outside of here that's not predictable, right? Like these are the same educators that raised my 23-year-old. That same educator raised my now 5-year-old, right? So all my children went through here. And you know, everything from meals together and how we show up is super important as to how this translates throughout. And I don't ever want to be alone in this work. You know, when this approach really does call us in, and like when we're in leadership meetings, it may look like beautiful chaos and that we're not getting work done, but there is a love in the room that, you know, they love being with each other. And so it's a lot of laughing and joking because we've created a place of belonging. And I think that's super critical as you think about how to grow something like this, because if I step away at any moment, they got it. They got it.
So many words in there resonate. And what a couple that rose to the top for me are intentionality, right? This is intentional work. Like this is a commitment to community. It's a commitment to the people who are choosing to be part of this community with us. I mean, it's not like with me, it's with us. We're all in it. I think the things that I see that have been needed. So in New Haven, one of the things that we are doing, which is not being done really anywhere else, is that we are bringing people together who normally would not be together. Meaning we have different, New Haven is really siloed based on race and zip code. And we have families who probably would not interact with each other if they were not interacting through their children. And so we think a lot about what do we need to do to ensure then that there's equity when you're bringing to folks who have different life experiences into one place. So we think about flexibility, trust, and really commitment. Those are the three things that we have found that really need to be there. And that's true for all of us. So flexibility, true equity is not static, right? Individual needs change all the time, and you need to be aware of that. And as an institution, we need to have policies that allow for both a fertile foundation for equity to truly grow, for community to truly grow, for all the things that we just talked about, while at the same time holding space and holding firm on some things that are really clear, whatever that may be for your organization. For us, clarity for us comes in our values. So the Quaker values: simplicity, peace, community, equity, stewardship, integrity, right? All values that are very universal. And then the way we live it shows up in our in our mission, right? Educate children, empower families, inspire teachers, engage community, embrace diversity, embody equity. And those pieces are what we think of. Everything that we do, we think of them through those lenses. And it really becomes a shared understanding, a co-created understanding, I should say. And so it changes each year based on sort of what's happening and what's happening around us. But that idea of flexibility, trust, and commitment are always there. Other thing that I think is really critical as we do this is recognizing the patterns that are in the world that we are trying to operate in, because it's a constant need to counterbalance them. So if we live in a world of perfectionism and like everything has to be this way and perfect, and if we imagine what that does to children as they're trying to learn, because in order to learn, you have to fail sometimes. And in order to fail, you have to try. And why would you try if you're going to fail? It becomes a cycle. And so we try to counterbalance that with actually a culture of gratitude and appreciation. So a constant reminder that you are seen, you are valued, you are heard, you are part of this ethos, again, to use that word, and you have the ability to impact and transform it or move it if there's something that doesn't feel right for you. And so we've had to really be conscious about that, because some people come to that work with a power that has been given to them based on whatever issue. Maybe they're in our society, they have a power position based on their education, based on their race, based on their height. There's all these different things. And so we've had to be really intentional. I'll give you just one example. We were hearing from families who are really comfortable coming to teachers and administration and saying, I want this. And we weren't hearing from all families. So we had to really, this is when we first started, we had to say, okay, this is sort of a societal thing. People who are comfortable in institutions, people who are comfortable, going to a school and saying, hey, I don't like what you're doing, I want you to do this. Why aren't we hearing from everybody? And so now when we hear an issue from one family on whatever issue it may be, we reach out to every family in that classroom and we ask for their input. And what we have found is they don't always correlate, right? You're hearing from the one family who has a concern, but the whole class may really enjoy that aspect of the programming. So it's just thinking about how are you creating space to lift up voices who are normally marginalized and oppressed, and how are you able to have the conversations with those who are comfortable expressing themselves. And that cannot happen if you do not have trust, if you don't have a commitment, if you're not clear from the beginning, those kind of things. So that's really how we have built this community, is based on those values. And then it's a lot of leaning in, right? When people say that word, leaning in, but it's a lot of that. It's not shying away. It's comfortable with discomfort. It's, hey, all right, this is messy. We're going to get through it. We're together. We're going to do this. And then we have found that to be the way that people feel a part of something, the way, to use the word Ellicia used, belong. Belonging is a really critical part of our work.
Yeah. Ellicia, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that is really good. No, Allyx did a great job. I'm always learning from my colleagues, and it's no matter where you are, there are some things that are critical in creating spaces for community. And It's just really beautiful to hear that this is happening around the country, because again, it is a state of privilege to have this mindset and to be with like-minded people and to have the trust of those people, because that's a big thing. When folks start here and we have to lean into that discomfort or what we call healthy tension or radical thinking, that's a lot to take on. But to watch families and educators become vulnerable, it's great, because we start breaking down those barriers and changing generations of families. And so, yeah, we are. I'm really grateful to be in this work and to not be alone. So thank you, Trust for Learning,
Yeah.
for connecting um, programs around the country that can lift each other up and hold each other in this ethos.
I
It's
I love that language you used, Alicia, healthy tension. I'm gonna borrow that.
yeah.
It's a good one.
Okay, so I'm going to segue with a bad joke. Speaking of unhealthy tension, the current political climate, and I'll pause and say, anybody who's listening live, if you have a question for Alicia or Allyx or both of them, please go ahead and send it now because we're going to start wrapping up. But we're all living with this uncertainty at the federal level. I'm curious to hear how you are both weathering it and how you are protecting, supporting your communities and kids from experiencing that tension themselves. So one of the things that I study in terms of research is the ways that stress influences development, right? And we have big macro stressors, we have small, close proximal stressors. We're all living right now through a really big stressful moment as a country. And there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So how are you both navigating that? I'm curious what the balance is of protecting your peace and advocating. And Alicia, we got a question for you, which was, do you still call the governor each week? Right. So what's that balance of that nurturing and that unwaveringness for you both in this moment? Like what advice would you offer to all
Funny
of
because
us?
if she's listening, I want to lift up someone named Lisa Shear. I mean, she's unwavering and probably calls every day. But yeah, we call often, and it's funny. This last year, we've taken a kind of step to the left to figure out, okay, how much of this advocacy can we lean into, and like how much do we make sure that we're still making sure that internal pieces are, because it's hard, right? Like how do we continue to focus on all of the internal pieces and then advocate for all of the local, state, and federal policy changes? And so I'm really grateful for my team that they've allowed me to kind of lean into the advocacy space and then they protect the nest. Because I think that trying to do all of that really can feel very imbalanced. And so I think when I met Ellen, I was at home during a pandemic with 7 children, and I don't even know how I survived that. But in coming back out of that, we decided that Andrew and I could no longer hold it all, and so we've welcomed the thought partnership, hearts and minds of some incredible humans lately, and so like we've grown this leadership team and capacity, because I think that's another part of it is that we try to do it all, and so that's not, you're not, you can't do that. And so trying to even encourage each other to find the time to step away. We're allowing teachers to take mental health days. We've now started some coaching and mentoring within our program, and then also we've added some mental health like group therapy and think single therapy for our teachers, just for all the, because while this seems very beautiful and like all the things that we want, it's hard work. And we want to make sure that we're checking in and leaving people well. So,
Agreed. It reminded to answer your question very specifically, one of the things that we've been doing since 2014 is we have something called an emotional well-being program. And that program is an overarching umbrella that really holds space for children, families, and educators to feel safe, loved, supported. So that is something we've had in place, which really allowed us to both weather the pandemic. You forgot to mention the pandemic, Ellen. Like
Yeah, sorry, blocking it out.
Right? We came out of this just horrific trauma, not just individually for all of us and our children that we manage, but also for our sector. I mean, there were lots of sectors that were impacted, but ours were particularly decimated. And so now you have this uncertainty and this vitriol and this space of personal attack. So we have a similar system that Ellicia manages that I get to be part of an organization that has grown to a place where we see ourselves as advocates. So it's not a separate thing. But we have expanded the team to be able to do that. And I would say that if you're not at that place, it's figuring out how do you partner with other like-minded spaces, and how do you do those very quick things like a 3-minute testimony, right? It's literally 3 minutes, and you can sign up. This is what happens in the state of Connecticut. So it's like finding those kind of things where you can lean in. But I think the biggest thing to answer, like, how do I manage this, is I really try to stay centered by leaning in and lifting up what is happening on a day-to-day basis. And I see a huge tension between people who are living it and people who can sort of cerebrally manage it. So I can sit back and sort of think about this and debate the Constitution because of my privilege. And then I'm working with people and in partnership and love people who are not. They are living it. They are worried about who's going to knock on their door and wondering where their next meal is going to be, all those things. So I think what I try to do is name that. And at Friend Center, we try to name it, lean into it, name it, and deal with it, and be very, very clear. The way that I think about it and sort of try to manage this, and I'm, to your point, like I am comfortable sort of being aggressive. That's something I've learned to do. I mean, it's sort of a resilience, and it goes back to that vulnerable but clear. Like, I will be clear that we cannot expect things from people when we are persecuting them. We cannot, what I see is, like, when people are scared, only safety matters at that time. When they're starving, only food matters. When you're hunted, only hiding matters. Like, all these things. Poverty, if you're living in poverty or forced to live in poverty, you want to get out of it. If you are unhoused, only housing matters. So you have all these things. So how do you counterbalance that? And how do you get people who are not living it to understand that? And here's the example I've been using. If you're swimming and you're attacked by a shark, and I start to try to talk to you about the migration patterns of sharks, you're going to be like, I'm trying to fight for my life. Like, that's what matters to me now. So either come help me or get out of this sort of intellectual discussion about it. And so how do you move people to act? Because action is what is going to change these systems. And when I say these systems, I mean our sector, our system, which, as Ellicia mentioned, is so underfunded. We're a childcare desert as well. The entire country basically has childcare deserts everywhere, and we continue to inadequately invest. We lose $122 billion a year as a country because we won't invest. My state loses $1.5 billion, right? And so we got to lean in. You got to lean in on education, on food security, housing, equity, peace, inclusion, acceptance, belonging, community, right? And stay centered and grounded on these values to make sure that our communities are seen, valued, and heard. I mean, that's how I stay centered.
All right, I'm going to start to wrap us up. We really could talk for hours, and I'm so glad I get to hang out with you both in person and we get to talk for hours. But for folks who are tuning in, just to say there are lots of resources out there that we can collectively connect you with to learn more about the behind the scenes work of creating and supporting ideal learning environments. And we don't have any other questions. So I'm going to close with one final one that kind of builds on the points that you both were just making. So I wear a couple of different hats. I'm working my PhD in developmental neuroscience, primarily because I went to programs like Alicia's and Allyx and saw the magic happening and wanted to like get under the hood even further and try to understand how nurturing relationships support development. But I'm funded by the NIH. So I am participating with thousands, if not tens of thousands of scientists on Friday in the March for Science, and I'm really excited about it. It's so frustrating that we have these pressures coming down federally, but we are organizing in response and taking action. You both have been vanguard leaders on organizing and, storytelling and media work and advocacy. And we do have opportunities coming up for educators, early childcare educators and providers and programs to take a stand together. So I would love to just hear both of you, encourage whoever is listening about how they can lean in and take action collectively. What do you see as like the next few weeks, months, horizon of those actions? And if there's anything else you want to say before we wrap, feel free to get that talking point in there, because we'll wrap up after this question.
I would say, piggybacking off of what Alex said, is that knowing that there's room for you and that everything that we do counts in terms of advocacy and change work. So make a seat at the table. If the table seems big, just show up anyway. And because I think writing letters, making phone calls, showing up and saying, how can I be helpful, is really important in this season and climate. Because I think folks feel like, well, I have to, do something really big to be involved. And change work really starts with the littlest of gestures, and you will soon see that they grow. And I will say, even with Trust for Learning, some of the things that I'm doing with you all, I would have never imagined. And so I would say, just get started and say yes. Sometimes I say yes to things. I'm like, okay, what am I doing? Do it afraid. And I love what you said about when you're being hunted. What did you say when you're being hunted, Alex? Oh,
Yeah, when you're being like when there's so many things, when you're being hunted, only safety matters, right? If you're
right. And so I feel that pressure of our community right now of like, people are in the what can I do just for today. And so in our showing up for like what you can show up, just remember to slow down.
it's so funny. I mean, I think there's a lot of similarities, right? And when Leisha says she says yes to everything, I say yes to everything too. And I have to remind myself that like that is not saying yes to everything does not always the best thing for everything. Like, can you lean in only in places that really, so thinking about that, we specifically in Connecticut have been working on a lot of this legislative and advocacy work, and we have 4 bills. This is just sort of a shout out to anyone who's on here from Connecticut, but we have 4 bills right now still on the table. They'll be pared down and changed as they move through the process, but that is a product of the last 10 years of work, right? This stuff takes a long time. And so people continually, I mean, you joke about the woman who's going to have all the cats. I'm going to be the woman who has all the like protest t-shirts, like childcare matters, children matter, like I can make a full quilt. And that's what happens. You got to do it. You got to keep showing up. And so we're having a rally in Connecticut on May 7th, the morning without childcare. So anyone who's interested, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to connect. And that we were the ones who started that National Day Without Childcare, because we did that 4 years ago here. And now so there's a national opportunity for anyone around the country to participate in that. And we started that and did that because when we met with our federal people who were working at the federal level, and we said, what the heck? Why isn't there? I mean, even when we had a more friendly administration. We didn't get it done. And we were told that we had to provoke demand. So we had to show up to get that level of government to see us and recognize us. I think that's insulting, frankly, but we got to do it, right? So that's the piece, is how do you show up? And I had one thing that I really read yesterday that I wanted to share with all of you for the last things. So there's an, I'm looking for the data, but there's a polling place that is a Republican polling place called Up One. And they found that 91% of Republicans, 91% of independents, and 97% of Democrats think that childcare is a crisis or a problem that Americans cannot afford. So this is a universal issue. We have to remember it impacts everybody. And I think there's an opportunity here to come together and really make sure that we are doing better for our children and our families.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think one of the things that was so powerful about the work in Connecticut around the Morning Without Childcare and now the Day Without Childcare is that there is this effort to bring parents, educators, and early childhood providers together as a unified front, right? Because so often on so many levels, parents and educators have been pitted against each other. So yes, I think participating in May, supporting people to participate, you know, helping them see, Ellicia, that you can just say yes to a small thing and that still really matters. Is so important. And as you know, Trust for Learning sits at philanthropic tables, I am trying to ring that bell as much as possible and say, where are philanthropic funders showing up to support people who are going on strike, who are, you know, symbolically or actually putting themselves at risk to make that collective statement. So you both are leaders in that. Thank you. I hope many, many more people will be activated this year because of our context. Ellicia, do you have any last words? And then I think we can say thank you. And yeah, this was the antidote that I needed to the news of late. So I really appreciate spending time with you both. But yeah, Ellicia, any final thoughts?
Oh, I think we have covered a lot of bases. But thank you, Ellen, for doing this and for bringing Allyx and I together for this conversation, and the three of us together actually. It's been I wrote so much down, so it's been a very thought-provoking morning.
Thank you both. Thanks to everybody who's listening out there. Feel free to get in touch. All of us can share resources. We can connect you. We'll all connect each other with each other as needed to support all of us moving toward the ideals that I know that we share, but are sometimes challenging to put into practice without being in community like this. So I'm grateful for you both. And yeah, I think that's it for today. Thank you, Ellicia. Thank you, Allyx. Thanks to your colleagues who probably are supporting you behind the scenes to allow you to be on video for an hour, not attending to various things that are on your list. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, and talk to you both soon. Bye, guys.